Hey guys, it's Rocinante on the Space Couch. Today I'm going to be reviewing this, Cibola Burn by James S.A. Corey, Book 4 of The Expanse. Now, this book opens with a chapter that focuses on Bobby Draper, the Martian Marine, and she is now back on Mars. Now, there are a lot of arguments in her family as the younger members are complaining about what is the point of colonising Mars on this dead rock or any of the worlds in the solar system when there's over 1,000 empty planets just waiting to be settled. Now, there are a couple of new Viewpoint characters in this book. First one, Dimitri Havelock, who was actually Joe Miller's old partner on Ceres, and he's now part of a corporate security force. And also Basia, and he was a friend of Praxidike on Ganymede from the second Expanse novel. I remember his son had that genetic condition that the corporations were exploiting with the use of the protomolecule, turning them into super soldiers. Now, this book takes place all on one planet, essentially, and in orbit around that planet, as opposed to across the solar system. A group of Ganymedian refugees, including Basia and his family, has settled on a world they call Illis, but the corporation which has actually received the charter to that world calls it New Terra. Now, standard overreaching, of course, on both sides leads to a very tense military standoff. The settlers from Ganymede shoot down one of the shuttles of the corporation. Lots of people are killed. Now, into this mess comes Jim Holden and the crew of the Rocinante. Now, he's been chosen by Christian Avasarala and Fred Johnson to be the UN mediator. As Avasarala says, he's the worst possible choice, so he's perfect for it. Now, on Illis, however, things are starting to wake up after millennia of nothing, you know. The planet itself has been machined. There's no tectonic activity, although the tectonic plates on that planet have got straight edges and form shapes, you know. There are mineral deposits on that world in impossible quantities and purities, particularly lithium, which is why the Ganymedian refugees are there. They're trying to mine that very rare mineral. And it's just a strange planet, you know. There's ruins no one knows the purpose of, as well as a biosphere that's hostile to humans, you know. For instance, there are death slugs. They just come up out of the ground, you know, after rain, and if you touch them you die instantly pretty much, or very quickly after. We can't eat anything in that biosphere. It's that whole left-handed versus right-handed sugars and DNA cells. Very interesting, some of the creatures on that world. There's something called like a mimic lizard. I guess that'd be like the lyrebird here on Earth that just mimics whatever it hears. And there's another creature that when it's hunting its prey, you know how here on Earth it would be like, say, the tongue would shoot out, grab it and pull it back. Well, on this, you think that's what's happening, but it vomits up its entire stomach onto the thing and then drags it back in slowly, you know. It's like, well, alien biospheres, it's going to be different from Earth, definitely. Now, however, the security forces of the corporation, led by a guy called Mertry, they're out of control. You know, and there's several massacres on both sides. That does not help Jim Holden's position as mediator. Mertry just wants to just ignore him or just kill him. In fact, he kills one of the refugees in front of Holden within the first 5 minutes of Holden getting there. So that shows how much respect he has for Holden's position. Now, as I said, things are waking up on the planet. All is not well there. One of the ancient fusion reactors on the opposite side of that planet suddenly explodes. It's almost like an extinction level event. You know, when you see like a giant asteroid hitting the planet, that's the sort of effect it has. So there's giant tidal waves, hurricane force winds roaring across the planet, heading towards the settlement, and they have to evacuate to the alien ruins. At the same time, there are many small moons in orbit around this planet. all in perfectly circular orbits, perfectly evenly spaced apart. And apparently this planet had a planetary defense grid. Can I connect those dots? Let me see. So anyway, one of the moons, it looks like it's starting to melt, but it's essentially the defense platform coming back online. Now, it sends out a pulse of energy that disables the fusion reactors on the 3 ships that are in orbit, shutting down the fusion process. That's hard. That is godlike technology, you know. However, those 3 ships, the Rocinante, the Barber Piccolo, which is the Ganymedean refugee ship, and the Edward Israel, which is where Dmitry Havelock is based as one of the security guys, they've got no power other than, say, from their batteries, and they're going to fall out of orbit in due course and burn up in the atmosphere. Add to that, on the surface, one of the local virus agents, shall we say, of that planet is starting to make everyone go blind. Except for Holden. And that's because, you know how he's been on those cancer meds ever since Eros Station, and how heavily radioactive that was when him and Miller had to go there. Now, his cancer meds is what is stopping the alien virus from taking control, so not taking control, but from making him blind. So everyone else then has to have the same sort of meds to recover their eyesight. It's one of those things that was a slightly easily resolved problem, I suppose, in the book, but it was interesting. Now, there are increasing tensions with the security team. It just keeps ratcheting up and up and up. They've rigged one of their shuttles into a bomb, in case anyone tries anything funny, you know, or in case they want to just do a first strike scenario. So everyone's trapped either on the surface of the planet, facing this incoming extinction level event, hurricane and floods, with no food, of course, or they're stuck in orbit, plunging towards the atmosphere with no means of escape. Just another day in the Expanse. Now, Naomi Nagata, she has been on the Israel. She's been taken prisoner because when they realised that that shuttle had been turned into a bomb, they thought, we've got to be able to deactivate this. So she went over there, tried to deactivate it, got caught. Dmitry Havelock, who is like essentially the security guy in charge on the ship when Mercury's not around, he's been thinking for quite some time now, I'm on the wrong side. Always bad when that happens. So he helps Nagata to escape, and that just leads to more conflict, of course, between the Edward Israel and the Rocinante, which by this point, because the Barber Piccolo is the ship that's going to go first into the atmosphere, they're trying to lift it into a higher orbit before it does start burning up in the atmosphere. It's all very tense, you know. Basha's daughter is on the Barber Piccolo as well, so he's very worried about what's going to happen. In the meantime, however, back down planet side, Holden and Miller have got to figure out just what is happening to the planet after all these billions of years of dormancy. Now, they're able to access the planetary transit network, tunnels below the planet's surface which will remain stable for billions of years. That's what happens when there's no tectonic activity, by the way, to find what is known as a dead space, where the protomolecule cannot reach. Now, throughout the book, there are chapters called Interludes throughout it, and it's always the investigator. You know, as the interludes in the book say, though, for the protomolecule, it reaches out, it reaches out, it reaches out, it reaches out 113 times a second, it finds nothing. It builds the investigator, it destroys the investigator. It builds the investigator, it destroys the investigator. All that sort of things. Very interesting seeing things from the protomolecule's perspective, because it has no conscious intelligence of itself. The various little parts, people or whatever, who make up the protomolecule, they still have thoughts of their own. So obviously the investigator is Joe Miller, and he is trying to find out what happened. Holden asks, how will we know when we find this whatever? And Miller says, we'll know. Now, continuing escalations, you wonder how far can it possibly go, both in orbit and on the surface, as Mercury security goons and him continue their gross overreaching. Now, as I said, Havelock has helped Naomi escaped to Israel and he joins her on the Rocinante. On the surface, Miller and Holden make their way to one of the central hubs, trying to figure out how to switch off the defence perimeter. That will then allow the fusion reactor to come back online, and the ships won't fall into the atmosphere. There's another showdown, of course, with Mercury before they can switch off that machine, this magic bullet that killed the previous civilization, and then Miller vanishes. Now, how has Miller been following Holden around all this time? Well, it turns out, you know when that proto-molecule soldier boarded the Rocinante in the aftermath of Ganymede, and I wonder if that was Bash's son. I bet you it was. So many coincidences like that in this universe. Now, when it boarded the ship, it left a little bit of organic material so the proto-molecule could track them, as it were. That's how Miller's able to appear to Holden in that Battlestar Galactica Capra 6 kind of way. Once the crisis is resolved and things are starting to work out on the surface of the planet, he destroys the genetic bug, expecting he's seen the last of Joe Miller. But has he? I seriously doubt that that is the last of Joe Miller. Now, the book ends in a similar manner to how it began. You know, Bobby Draper, it opened with her on Mars with her family. It closes with Avasarala on Mars, meeting up with Bobby Draper for dinner after having had meetings with the Martian government and Prime Minister. Now, she is pissed because Holden succeeded. She'd sent him expecting he'd fail. I mean, that's usually what happens with Jim Holden. He always messes things up. There'd then be a shooting war, and everyone would pause in their rush to colonise these new worlds. Now, unfortunately, because everything essentially worked out, you know, floodgates are open. For planets like Mars, Ceres, and even Earth, it's going to spell disaster. This links right back into the beginning of the book. What is the point of colonising a planet like Mars when there's a planet like Earth right there next to it, you know? So, if Mars collapses, as now seems inevitable, what will happen to its 15,000 nuclear warheads and its interplanetary cruise missiles? What about its navy that is the envy of the solar system? Is it going to end up putting itself out for hire? Is it going to go rogue? I don't know. The book ends with Avasarala telling Bobby she needs her back on the board. Fascinating book as always with The Expanse. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Now I will just say though, this format that they're using in the books is not going to work in the TV show. You can't have main characters of the overall series not making appearances. We see this in Game of Thrones, of course. I think it's like Feast for Crows is like the fill-it-in book that doesn't have some of the main characters in it. Like I say, that works great in books, it won't work on the TV show. I expect they'll be bringing plot lines forward from various books. For instance, Avasarala is in all of the first series of The Expanse, and she doesn't even appear until the second book in the novels. Also about The Expanse, by the way, it has already been renewed for a second series, despite the fact the first one doesn't even start showing until December. That is very welcome news indeed. I should also let you know I have started reading Nemesis Games, Book 5 of The Expanse, and I shall be reviewing that for you in due course. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this content. Leave me a comment or a suggestion for an upcoming book you'd like to see reviewed, or hit that like button.